Okay, so welcome back. Hope you all had some delicious cake. Those of you online very much enjoyed the sweet treats, the salty treats, the peanut treat photos. Keep them coming. So it's time for our first keynote of the conference, and we are absolutely thrilled to be able to welcome Professor Johan Rooryck this afternoon, who is Executive Director of Coalition S and a visiting Professor of French Linguistics at Leiden University. As a linguist, Johan's main research interests lie in the interaction between morphology, syntax, and semantics, and the relation between language and core knowledge systems. Johan has authored and edited, I think, 5 books, if my information is up to date. And is perhaps best known to those of us in the open access community as the co-editor-in-chief of Glossa, a journal of general linguistics. He has over 20 years of experience as an editor, and is president of the Quality Open Access Market, a founding member and president of the Fair Open Access Alliance, a founding member of Mathematics in Open Access, Psychology Open, and this is getting harder to say, sorry, Psychology in Open Access, a founding member and president of Linguistics in Open Access, and a member of the Academia Europaea. That was the best I could do. I'm so sorry, Johan, it's been a really long day.
You're exaggerating, Caroline, but it's fine. Thank you.
Then I will hand over to Johan and we will take some questions and discussion at the end when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. At first I had promised Andy and Caroline and Catherine that I would talk a little bit about the transition of lingua to glossa, but that's a story that everybody knows. And then I thought, well, Janeway is and the lower decks, and it's really about the future. And this is what I would like to talk about. It's really about the future of Diamond Open Access and the work that I've been doing in Coalition S and in the DIAMAS project, actually, to paint a broader context, in fact, of where Diamond Open Access is going in the context of the Coalition S, the funders, and the more general picture in Europe and globally of Diamond Open Access. So first, a little bit about Diamond Open Access. Well, you know, of course, what Diamond Open Access means: no fees to authors or readers, which is equitable by nature and design, because then, of course, neither authors nor readers have to face charges, financial charges to participate in the scholarly discussion. This has been pioneered, of course, by Redalica Melica and Cielo in Latin America, but it's also a long-standing tradition in Europe, especially in the social sciences and humanities. This is sometimes forgotten. I mean, it's best organized regionally, I think, in Latin America. But I mean, I've always thought that there is a negative definition of Diamond Open Access, and there's a much more positive definition that is in terms of a governance model for scholarly publishing. I see it much more as a governance model for scholarly publishing. Basically, that makes a distinction between content-related elements and service-related aspects of publishing. This is something that I thought about not only in the context of Diamond Open Access and of the DIAMAS project, but also in the context of my own experience in the transition from lingua to glossa, thinking about, you know, what changed, and also in the context of Open Library of Humanities, which was really inspirational for me and in guiding the journal and thinking about the governance of the journal. So basically, this distinction is between content-related elements. All the journal and platform titles, papers, review decisions, correspondence, and so on should be controlled and owned by the scholarly communities, and there should be no that should be very firmly established. And then, of course, service-related aspects of publishing can be contracted with service providers on a competitive and time-delimited basis, and that is certainly also inspired by the practice of OLH, right? Who has contract with Silicon Chips, providing typesetting services and copy editing services. But it's not Silicon Chips that calls the shots. I mean, they provide services to the journals of the Open Library of Humanities, and that's it. Then there is that means that there is a nice balance there between, I think, public ownership of the contents and private services that we can contract as scholars, as scholarly editors, and scholarly publishing service providers to with these private enterprises. I've published a little bit about that in what I call principles of diamond open access. You see the link there. You can have a look there. But this is something that I thought I should mention at the beginning. Then a bit about the context of diamond open access in the context of what I do within Coalition S, namely in March 2021, we had a study funded on diamond open access publishing by an Operas-led consortium, and that study, I think, was foundational. I think for the way in which funders in Coalition S, so that means the EC, but also the big funders that are part of Coalition S, UKRI and others, thought about diamond open access. What that study found is that there are about 29,000 journals out there. Actually, we don't know very well. I mean, the range is between 19,000 and 29,000, but at least we know for sure that 11,000 of them are in their WJ, so they correspond to a certain number of quality criteria. These journals are largely multilingual, diverse, and mostly small. But at the same time, I mean, they represent a force. I mean, they may be divided and diverse, but they represent fully 44% of articles in our open access journals, which represents about 8 to 9% of total publishing volume. So dispersed as they are, diamond open access journals really represent a force, even if this is all about small journals. And although some people equate small journals with low quality, I don't think that is justified in any way, shape, or form. Of course, these journals do have operational challenges because they are so isolated. There's operational challenges. There's a lot of reliance on volunteering. And clearly what the study concluded was that there's a need for coordination, infrastructure, and sustainable funding. I'm not telling you, editors and OLH, anything new there. I mean, this is clearly the case. It's how can we scale from where we are, right? That is, I know that is also a problem for OLH. There's many more journals out there than we are currently, as OLH, able to fund. And that is basically because there is this lack of coordination and infrastructure at the national and the international levels. So this study inspired us, that means Science Europe and Coalition S, to launch the Diamond Action Plan, to plan to develop common resources for the Diamond Open Access system. This was launched in 2022 in Paris by 4 funders, basically, or funders and organizations. ANR, the French funder, France, as you know, is now very much gung-ho about Diamond Open Access, Coalition S, Operas, and Science Europe. About 150 organizations have signed up to this to work in a community to see how they can support Diamond Open Access. And there is close collaboration between the DIAMAS and the Craft Away projects that I'm going to talk about in a minute. The Diamond Action Plan is also co-organizing the Diamond Summit in Toluca, Mexico from 23 to 27 October 23, which will be a discussion about the Global Federation for Diamond Open Access. So this will also be, I mean, if you cannot go to Toluca, which is would not be surprising, you can also follow this discussion online. But the idea is really to build, you know, a united federation of planets. A united federation of Diamond Open Access going forward. And the latest development, of course, is the EU Council conclusions, political development in May 23, conclusions on what they call high quality, transparent, open, trustworthy, and equitable scholarly publishing. This is really in the context of equity, which was launched also by the UNESCO recommendations. Now, how do we make sure that, you know, everybody can participate equitably in the scholarly discussion? And clearly, I mean, they required open access to papers. They also said very clearly that authors should not to have to pay fees. They didn't say how that it would have to be paid, but they drew attention to not-for-profit, non-profit scholarly publishing models that should be supported, which, of course, in the words of the EU Council, is code for diamond open access. And so this and the call for open licenses and the call for authors to preserve their rights to their publications is clearly in line with that diamond open access ethos. So that is the context as it has been evolving in the last 3 years, which I think is actually very, very fast. I mean, I had not expected this to happen so fast. This support for diamond at the very highest level. In that general context, we are working on the DIAMAS project. DIAMAS project is an EC-supported project with a budget of 3 million, involving all of these actors, public service scholarly organizations from 12 European countries, many universities from all the way from Norway to Spain, but also DOAJ, the usual suspects, OASPA, EIFEL, Spark Europe, Science Europe, Operas, and so on. Liber also, the library organization in Europe, and the European University Association. So a lot of actors that really want to contribute to making diamond open access the default going forward, and looking in this project to realize that. Project objective is really, I think, what we all would like to see, namely make sure that open access becomes a standard publication practice, but really build a communication ecosystem for that, and build an infrastructure for it, what we call, with a perhaps not so well chosen word, institutional publishing service providers. The reason that we chose this acronym IPSP had to do with the call that the European Community, the EC, put out. They were talking about institutional publishing again, because there was this hesitancy to call it diamond, because diamond open access was associated with the business model, and of course the EC has to prove that it is business model neutral. So this is all politics, but the idea is clear, I think. I mean, this is really addressing organizations like OLH, but also, university presses, library initiatives, community initiatives, disciplinary initiatives, all the things that we OLH people do, right? And there are many smaller and bigger organizations like that in Europe that do this kind of thing. The only issue is to try and federate them and to make them adopt, of course, common standards, guidelines, and best practices, which we will try to develop into what we call an extensible quality standards for institutional publishing, acronym EXIP, again, for want of a better word, making this possible, making this alignment possible across the various diamond open access initiatives that we know. This is basically the overview of the project. We've done the landscape study. We've had 700 responses from various IPSPs, including OLH, of course. We've mapped also existing quality standards and made those into a report. Then we will start to improve coordination, quality, and sustainability of IPSPs. And the third objective is to formulate policy and strategy recommendations, which I will talk about in a second, because we are, I mean, given the very quick political developments, we are of course anticipating that already a little bit. But the idea there is to really, develop recommendations at every level of the academic ecosystem to make people more aware of diamond open access. As I always say, when I was working at Leiden University, nobody knew that I was publishing a diamond open access journal, except perhaps for my direct supervisor. But in the university, nobody knew. There was absolutely no interest in these kinds of initiatives. I mean, it was basically something that was even frowned upon, because what were you supposed to do? You were supposed to do two things, namely, you have to publish a lot in the top level journals on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have to bring in money, to quote my dean at the time. And those are the two things you have to do. I mean, editing a journal is really something that is very, very low on the list. And so we need to create awareness, I think, with deans, with university leadership, that this is important and this is something that they should allow people to create time for. That is one thing. We also should talk to ministries to make sure that they fund Diamond Open Access as an equitable way to publishing, and make them aware. So this is really about engaging institutional leaders and managers in the third part. Deliverables of this project are an IPSP database, so a database basically of organizations like OLH that are engaged in Diamond Open Access publishing, with a registry, so where we can sort of meet as a community. This EXIP, and extensible quality standard for institutional publishing, a tool suite, guidelines, so to help people also to self-assess, right, who want to join this Diamond Open Access community, and a suite of resources for sustainability of IPSPs. One of the things that I'm dreaming of is that, you know, a journal that would want to flip to open access would be able to go to some platform, and then pick basically all the solutions that they need. Pick preferably Janeway, of course, as their submission system and publication platform. Pick also copy editing and typesetting services as they see fit. And also find materials to learn about it, materials to learn how to use that submission system. But basically, you know, that journals could flip from commercial solutions to Diamond Open Access solutions. One of my great frustrations, for instance, is that NeuroImage, when NeuroImage flipped, they basically flipped from a high APC at Elsevier to a lower APC at MIT Press. Well, I don't think that is right. I think they should have flipped to Diamond Open Access, and the fact that we don't have the resources yet available for that means that we have to build them. I mean, we can do this. OLH has proven that it is possible to do that. Basically, what we want to do is, you know, scale up that solution to the European level. So recommendations and guidelines, of course, and also the building blocks for what we call a capacity hub for Diamond Open Access publishing. That would be basically in Europe, of course, because of the limits on the grant. But you see what we are trying to do here. I mean, basically, it is very much what OLH has been trying to do as well. A little bit about EXIP, perhaps. This idea about EXIP was designed to have two iterations. Namely, EXIP 1.0 is a kind of an aspirational gold standard, specifying what an ideal Diamond Open Access IPSP and journal could be. Right? It's based. We have published that. You can consult it if you want to. I'll talk about it in a minute on the next slide. And then we will not try to impose this from the top down, because I mean that would be a major mistake. We believe. Right? The idea is to have to co-create, adapt, refine, and co-create versions of EXIP 1.0 that are best suited for specific disciplines, regions, and languages. Because the last thing you want to do, you know, is to impose a single size of bananas in the European community, right? I mean, or a single size for apples. What you want to do is really have a kind of a strong Diamond Open Access landscape that allows for varieties in this quality standard, but that are justified, and that there is a common theme across those, so that there is a family of standards and guidelines along a common base, but that allows for discussion, that allows for adaptation, and that is nimble, not a single standard from above. That was the reason for this iterative approach. As it stands now, this EXIP talks about funding. It talks about ownership and governance. It should be common unity governance and stuff, of course, and there should be specifications about content ownership. Open science practices as well. You know, journals should have data policies. We want to promote open peer review as well going forward. This is a conversation that we will have to have as well in the Diamond Open Access community. Editorial quality, management, and research integrity. I mean, those are things, of course, that OLH has also been trying to improve amongst their journals. We've recently been working on that, as you know, as editors. Technical service efficiency, you know, requirements for platform, for metadata, for preservation, some things that were addressed already at this lower deck symposium. And then, of course, everything about visibility, indexation, communication, marketing, and impact, which is really a separate package. And finally, another separate package is really, you know, about equity, diversity, and inclusion. What do you do about multilingualism? How do we address things like gender equity? Do we have plans for that? So really, these kinds of seven packages within the extensible quality standard for institutional publishing that I think you know, all IPSPs should be thinking about, and that I think OLH already satisfies amply. But again, you know, we need to share these experiences beyond the OLH with other IPSPs in Europe and beyond, I believe. The Craft Away project is a project that complements the DIAMAS project. I want to mention it here because it's a project that is more technical, that will provide technical improvements for journal platforms and software, primarily, but not limited to OJS, of course. But but certainly also in terms of interoperability with Janeway, I think there's lots of possibilities there. Communities practice for infrastructure improvement, enhanced visibility, and so on for Diamond Open Access Publishing. Sorry, that was too quick. And integrated with data aggregators. The ultimate goal is to, you know, lay this foundation for a Diamond Open Access Publishing Capacity Hub that helps IPSPs and then helps editors to with tools, guidelines, governance, funding, you know, to make people aware of the possibilities and help them set up their journals. I mean, both new editors and editors who want to flip. Craftaway project will add this capacity in technical terms. And of course, I mean, this Diamond Open Access Capacity Hub should not be thought of as another ugly concrete building in Brussels. It will be a virtual distributed network, of course. This is not something that should be in a single place. It's really should be a distributed network of resources and collaborating regional national capacity centers. We already, I'll talk about that on the next slide. The idea is really to have this as an equitable platform for readers and authors, for editors and institutional publishers, for service providers as well. You can have a marketplace there where services can be offered to and negotiated with institutional publishers, and also for funders and ministries where they see how best practices are being implemented in Diamond Publishing, for aligning publishing, and so on and so forth, for recommendations and for technical infrastructure. So the idea is basically a little bit this. You would have a European capacity hub for open access scholarly publishing with various national capacity centers for open access scholarly publishing, and also institutional publishers and service providers like OLH. And these the national capacity centers, of course, would work with institutional publishers and with service providers, but there would be national capacity centers, because we found in the DIAMAS project that, in fact, those countries where Diamond Open Access is organized best are those countries where there is a kind of a national hub. So that is Open Edition in France, for instance, which really functions as a national hub for Diamond Open Access, coordinating 500 journals. Same in Croatia, where Hać, or I never can pronounce it, coordinates 500 journals, again, in a very small country. The Finnish journals, which are coordinated by the society publishers. And I'm forgetting one, Spain, where FECIT, the national funder, is actually coordinating all the Spanish Diamond Open Access journals. So one of our recommendations really is, you know, make sure that there is such a hub at the national level, because national level is best acquainted also with legal hurdles and with, you know, the more local elements that are useful. And we know already that Germany is going to try and set up a hub for this, and Switzerland is thinking about this. So this is one of the ways that we see going forward. Of course, this already exists in Latin America, right? I mean, in Latin America, we have already 2 regional hubs, Cielo and Redalic. I make it a little bit more neutral here, but the idea is really to have this united federation of planets. in the context of Janeway, of course, I have to refer to Star Trek, right? But this kind of United Federation for Open Scholarly Publishing. And again, I refer here to the Global Summit of Diamond Open Access, where these things will be discussed, where we will try to set up this global federation, because of course, commercial publishers operate at a global level. So we need, as Diamond Open Access, to also operate at the global level in order to be able to compete with them fully. And I do think we should be able to compete with them fully, and to put some pressure there going forward. So all of this is very aspirational, of course, but I do think that the political stars are aligned in such a way that we should be able to organize this. And this is one of the ways that I've worked with Pierre Mounier and with others at Operas to conceptualize this. So the idea would be to use Operas as a service provider for this European Diamond Open Access Capacity Hub. The reason for this is that Operas has the legal structure to be able to do this. They are what is called an ERIC. I won't bore you with the details, the legal details of an ERIC, but an ERIC is basically an infrastructure or a kind of legal entity that they are aspiring to be. And that's a legal entity that allows infrastructures to be funded by national ministries and by the European Commission. So the structure is already there. They're also a thematic node in EOSC, Operasis, and so they would be ideally situated, because they already have quite some experience with Diamond Open Access, to provide services to this European Diamond Open Access Capacity Hub, whose governance, of course, would then be organized for instance, by funders and by other entities. So that's one of the things we're thinking about. And of course, this this European Diamond Open Access Capacity Hub would then also be interact with national and regional Diamond Open Access Capacity Centers, who could also finance that thematic node, in interaction with institutional publishers and with publishing service providers. So that is what we are trying to set up now going forward. We hope to be able to set something up by 2025. So this is what we are dreaming of, and yeah, you have to have a dream, and I do think, like I said, that the political stars are aligned to make this possible. But of course, between this nice plan and reality, there's still a way to go. Now, looking forward, I put a picture here of a warp picture to show that we, can look forward about this. So Diamond Open Access clearly allows researchers to take back control of scholarly content. That is what it's all about, right? We need to take back control. We have let this situation evolve in the wrong direction for 30, 40 years. And if we don't take back scholarly content, nobody will do it for us, certainly not the commercial publishers. Council conclusions underscore the need for Diamond Open Access infrastructure. That's the first time in my lifetime that that we have political support for Diamond Open Access. I think we should all rejoice in that. I mean, I would have never thought that it was possible even 3 or 4 years ago. And this infrastructure should be federated and distributed like other large international research infrastructures. What I compare this to really is like the Large Hadron Collider or the Hubble telescope. These are things that are being used by these are large research infrastructures that are used by researchers all over the world. Why don't we do the same for publishing? Of course, that's a distributed infrastructure that's different from a single infrastructure, a telescope or a Large Hadron Collider. But in spirit, it's the same. So this is, I think, one of the ways we can sell it. Large research infrastructures are a natural thing in certain sciences. Why don't we do the same for publishing? And that's a way of taking back the initiative. And we believe that, the people who are thinking about this, that this infrastructure will allow Diamond Open Access journals to align in Europe and beyond. And this is where I will stop. Okay, and no doubt you have lots of questions.
Wow. Thank you, Johan. I feel like my mind has just been kind of blown apart with such a rich cake of ideas. Like, so many ideas in your vision for how we're going to align the stars, how we're going to set out a global infrastructure to match that of the commercial providers. I have a lot of questions, but perhaps I'll open it up to the floor first or to online, which I will try and follow on Discord on my telephone. Any questions from the room right now? Yep, okay. Mike, roving Mike. Who's got it? Have I got it? Thanks, Paula. Thanks. Mike's just coming.
Yeah. Hello, here it's Aldo Rampioni from System Media Lab. A couple of questions. I would have many more, but let me just ask you a couple of them. The first one is, in my experience, journals are like living organisms. And they do change with time, and the need change with time, and the resources needed change with time. How do you see those changes reflected in the Diamond Open Access? So how can we tailor the Diamond Open Access to meet different needs at different stages of the journal? That's my first question. My second question is more a comment. I ask you to comment. I'm pretty sure you are aware of Scope 3, no? That is the open access. Can you comment on that? Because there is exactly what you were somehow referring to. When in high energy physics community, you have large facilities that facilitates the coordination of researchers worldwide, and that makes it possible. It made it possible to come with a Scope 3 consortium. While it is much more difficult when there is a sparse, I don't know, a diversified landscape that requires a lot of energy can you comment on that? These two questions.
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know the details of Scope 3 very well, but we've invited Kamran Naim to the Toluca conference to tell us about it, and to also tell us about how CERN, for instance, can serve as a model for the governance of such a federation. Definitely Scope is doing great work there, right? But they negotiate also with commercial publishers. So one of the things that we would like to do, of course, is to have much more of a completely Diamond OA model. In some cases, some of these journals that Scope 3 is negotiating with are in practice Diamond OA. So this is something that I would like to understand more about. About the growing need of journals. Well, this is of course something that is also something that we have at some level in OLH, right? Journals grow or shrink, and as a function that you would need more means or more financial means, or you need to adapt the governance. I personally am quite aware of the fact that a small journal, for instance, has very different needs from a bigger journal. It's a very different thing to be editing a journal that has 15 to 20 publications a year, and a journal that publishes 120 publications a year. The kind of needs that you have, both from the submission system and the platform, and in terms of organization and in terms of governance, are quite different. And this is again something that we need to think about. It's not something that we have a single solution for. This is really something that needs to be discussed in the community, and that we have to think about. I don't have a template for you. This is really something that we will have to do together. But it's clear for me that the profile of a journal that publishes 15 to 20 or 15 to 25 journals a year, or a journal that publishes over 80 papers a year, and a journal that publishes over 80 papers a year, is very different. I always compare it to your local baker, who gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning and bakes their bread and sells it, to a sort of a semi-industrial baker that has 10 bakeries in a city and then stops there, to an industrial baker that serves a country, so to speak. That's the kind of similarity that I sometimes see. the organization of these three types of bakers is just very different, and we are going to see the same in terms of the journals that we serve in this Diamond Open Access community. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Johan. We've got a question online from someone who goes by DG. No idea who DG is, if they'd like to identify themselves. Is it? Okay, cool. So they say, Johan, how does supporters of Diamond OA reckon with the fact that most of our funding sources remain business model agnostic, as you said in your talk? How does that agnosticism limit Dimas's goals?
Not sure. Can DJ perhaps clarify the question by unmuting themselves, because I mean, because
can you hear me?
It was about neutrality, wasn't it? EU neutrality, is that right?
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm basically saying is I don't know which sort of public body or European body you were mentioning that said has to remain quote unquote business model agnostic, which means they can only support Diamond in sort of hushed tones. But what I mean is if they remain agnostic, that means that they support APCs and commercial models at the same time that they support Dimas and Diamonds. So how does that contradiction and that support for commercial models, even though they're still supporting Diamond in sort of hushed tones, how does that limit the extent that Diamond can progress?
I don't think that necessarily limits the. I mean, first of all, I think it's important that we set up Diamond in such a way that it can be properly funded and that it can be properly, organized at the right level. The idea, of course, in the long term, I believe, is that we have to move away from commercial publishing and that we can show that this model is much less expensive and is a real alternative for commercial publishing. I don't think it's black and white. I don't think we can move away from APCs and transformative agreements overnight. I mean, some people believe that, but I just don't think it's possible. I don't think funders or ministries or libraries can do it. I mean, one of the more important newsworthy elements of the day is, for instance, yesterday there was this news that Elsevier has a new contract in Germany. And again, I think that's a lot of money that's going to be spent. I mean, 2,500 a pop. I mean, I'm 2,500 euros for every article that is published in Germany in Elsevier journals. That's a lot of money, all the way to 2028 to be paid for open access. And obviously, these are not the solutions that we want in the long term, but we want to be able to create an alternative that obviates the need for such expensive solutions. Let me put it this way. And we have to start somewhere. So we have to start, by compromising somewhat, but at least try to build this thing going forward. I think there's a lot of goodwill right now, especially with the political entities that support us, and even if they have to remain business neutral, I think there is clearly a lot of support to develop these solutions going forward. Does that answer your question? I mean, I don't want to give you a purely political answer.
Yeah, it answers it, but I don't want to belabor the point, so other people can jump in as well. Thank you.
I've got a question, Johan. You mentioned university leadership and how we need to work on recognizing the necessary editorial labor that academics need to put in, particularly to voluntary run Diamond Open Access journals. Do you have any sense from the studies that you've done so far at Dimas how we access and kind of engage senior management teams, university deans, all of those senior leaders across the different.
Yes, one of the ways that we want to do that, at least in Coalition S, is by participating in COARA, the Coalition for Advancement of Research Assessment, which will try to make university leadership. I mean, there's now about, I think, 500 organizations that have signed this. And that is really about, moving away from this idea that the only thing that counts is publishing papers, not reviewing papers, and getting money, right? As some of our deans tend to remind us. But that really researchers should be evaluated on a much broader set of criteria. And that's where I think we should bring in, leadership in editing, but also reviews, for instance. I mean, I set up, together with a number of other people, we set up a working group within Coara to make reviewing much more visible, and to make sure that reviewing is considered as important as writing papers. I mean, because who of us, raise your hand, who of us is asked at their annual review to list the number of reviews they have done, as opposed in comparison to publications published? None of us, right? I remember the exact date, actually, in 2005, 6, something like that. Not an exact date, but the exact period when actually this was removed from my performance review form. And I thought, well, this is strange. Why are they no longer asking me this? But we evolved. This was like, almost 20 years ago, but we evolved toward the monoculture of research output. This is not something that happened by accident. We did this to ourselves, and we let it happen. We did not react at the time. We were really like, frogs in the proverbial pot of heating water, and we let it happen in the same way that we let commercial publishers take over every aspect of academic publishing in the last 25 to 30 years. I mean, I'm very well situated for that because I started in 1999 as a publisher, and slowly as an editor, and slowly my independence as an editor at Lingua was limited. Was more and more limited, in the same way that at the university, reporting about all the activities that I did was more and more limited, until the only thing that mattered was publications and money. And that's not an environment that I want to live in. I don't think that's an environment that any of us want to live in. So we need to change that. One of the ways of doing that is Coara. That's a large organization that can put pressure on university leadership. Not just pay lip service to changing research assessment, but really do it. And so that's why I think that we should all participate and make our university leadership aware that this is a change that is coming.
Thank you. Yeah, and we'll try and get a link to Coara in the panel discussion. Got another question here online from Catherine Mitchell. In terms of the DIAMAS vision for shared infrastructure, which parts are going to be federated and which will be distributed? Good question.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Catherine. And that is exactly what we will be talking about in Toluca. There's actually also a project underway, a project that is being started, that we are starting in Europe, again, to try and see how lessons learned in the DIAMAS project how that can be aligned, for instance, with Latin America, with Red Alica Melica, and also with AGEL in Africa. So that is one of the things where we will see what kind of, I think one of the things that can be aligned, for instance, is trainings and best practices. That is really something that can be aligned across regional hubs. So this is really something. But I think otherwise, I mean, there should be a lot of independence of each regional hub, and I consider California a regional hub almost. To do as they see fit, and also to use that as a kind of to use these excellent test cases like OLH and like e-scholarship as examples of how similar units or service centers, institutional publishing centers can be set up to serve the Diamond Open Access community. But I think we should allow for a lot of liberty and a lot of variation across. It's not one size fits all. There should be a lot of variation across the regions, taking into account the local situations. that is my provisional answer. I mean, I don't know beforehand what should be federated and what should be local. I think this should really be determined on a case-by-case basis in a flexible manner, listening to arguments, sitting together and seeing what is possible.
Thank you. Another online one. What, in your opinion and experience, are the biggest challenges to creating a global federated network, and what are the biggest opportunities?
I don't know yet. We will see in Toluca. So, get yourselves over there and participate in the discussion, I would say. I don't know yet but there are some challenges, right? I mean, one of the challenges that we have already encountered is that some of the people in Red Alica Medica, for instance, are very much oriented towards the idea that of ownership of ownership of academic outputs. So they are very much totally against commercial publishers. So this is something that is what they call the commodification of academic outputs. And I totally sympathize with that, but I think in Europe the situation is somewhat more fluid. I mean, I think Red Alica Medica has the advantage of having a well-established ecosystem. I think in Europe the situation is sometimes a little bit more fluid. You have a lot of institutional publishing service providers that interact with commercial actors in a way that is more fluid. And of course, the ideal there is to go towards diamond, but sometimes that's more difficult because you're working with commercial publishers who are not yet accustomed to the idea of diamond open access publishing. And we will have the task of convincing those smaller commercial entities that diamond is the way forward and that this is not something that they should be afraid of. And there's take for instance something like Copernicus in Germany or other service providers. I mean, they have a number of diamond open access journals. They have a number of journals that work with APCs. What I would not want to do is to exclude them by saying, well, you have some journals with APC, so you don't belong. What I want to have is a situation where we can convince them that the way forward is to gradually, bring the APC journals towards diamond open access, and there are possibilities for that. That is something that we want to facilitate. The same is true, by the way, for Open Edition in France. They work with a number of diamond open access journals. They work with some journals that are slightly more commercial. Again, the goal, I think, is to align over time. And so those are some of the challenges that we see. We will see in every region, we will see things. I mean, if you look at Africa, you will still see other challenges. In Africa, the problem is capacity. I talked to Susan Murray, for instance, and she said, we know of at least 400 journals that would like to join us, but we simply don't have the means. Right? I mean, and I mean, Olesha has the same story, right? I mean, you have to refuse journals that want to flip simply because you don't have the means to accommodate them. So this is a situation I think that we need to address as quickly as possible, so that we have the means to bring diamond open access forward and to make it the default over time.
So some more carrot than stick, maybe.
Both, by all means. Yeah.
There is another question online. I think unless there's any other burning questions in the room, maybe I'll make this one the last question. No one's jumping up. We've had quite a long, intense day over here, and I think everyone's got post-cake slump. But okay, so this will be the final question, Johan. We're incredibly grateful for your time, and I can't believe you're still so buzzing.
Yeah, I didn't have cake. You didn't send me any.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. By the time it gets to you, you won't want to eat it properly.
Not in this weather, indeed.
So a question for those of us already doing this kind of work in silo, what should we be doing now to make this vision of a global federated network real? So what should we do, Johan? Tell us.
Participate, form communities, reach out to other journals, reach out to other clusters, to discuss, to see what you need, to determine what is necessary going forward. Participate in the discussion. That would be my advice. organize. You know, we have to move away from this idea that, you know, every diamond journal is an island. We really need to create an island empire. That was what we need to do, and it's possible. We just need to, you know, we have the political support now. We have the support of large financial funding organizations who want to, you know, contribute in some way. So we will see how this goes, but really organize and prepare yourselves, and, you know, look at EXIP, read EXIP, see what you can contribute, what you can use, what is problematic for you. You know, look at the Diamond Open Access principles, see if those work for you, and whatnot. There's a lot of materials out there that I think we need to discuss in our various communities to be able to move forward. That would be my advice.
Wonderful, thank you. So the federated system of planets is achievable and is already being built. Please, can you all join me, both online and in the room, with thanking Johan for his time? I think that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you.